For years, officers Vince Decker and Ray Hogan had ruled the streets of Detroit like petty kings, untouchable and unaccountable. Every patrol was a chance to throw their weight around. Traffic stops turned into shakedowns. Complaints vanished into the void of a system that shielded them. They fed on fear, knowing the badge on their chest was a free pass to do whatever the hell they wanted. No one dared to push back. Not the junkies, not the working stiffs, not the families just trying to scrape by. Until they crossed the wrong man. A black man walking his dog through a quiet stretch of their turf. A guy they figured was just another nobody they could rough up for kicks. They thought power was theirs to wield, thought their guns made them gods. They were dead wrong. Justice was coming, and it wouldn't be wearing blue. The evening rain tapped a restless beat against the cracked sidewalks of outer Detroit, a worn-down patch of the city where the houses leaned tired against each other, their gray brick facades stained with years of neglect. Flickering streetlights buzzed overhead, casting a jaundiced glow over the wet pavement, their light stuttering like a pulse on its last legs. The air hung thick with the sharp bite of gasoline and the earthy damp of soaked soil, a faint whiff of rust threading through it all. It was the kind of night that felt alive with unease, like the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. Marc Reynolds moved through it with a quiet, coiled grace, a man who'd walk through hell and come out the other barn side. At 42, he bore the marks of a life spent on the edge, 15 years with Delta Force, dodging IEDs in Afghanistan, hunting shadows in Syria, living where a split-second hesitation could end you. Now he was just a freelance security guard, a gig that kept the lights on and let him fade into the background. Detroit wasn't a choice, it was a refuge, a place to bury the echoes of gunfire and the ghosts of men he'd lost. But some things stuck. His dark eyes swept the street ahead, sharp and unyielding, reading every flicker of light, every shift in the shadows, the way he'd once scanned a desert horizon for sniper nests. He adjusted the faded scar on his knuckles, a jagged souvenir from a Syrian ambush Titan had pulled him through, and kept walking. Beside him padded Titan, his German shepherd, 7 years old and still a force of nature. The dog's black and tan coat shimmered faintly under the drizzle, his ears flicking at the distant howl of a stray or the hiss of tires slicing through puddles. Titan wasn't just a piece, he was a soldier, a partner who'd walked the same razor's edge Marc had. In Kabul, he'd nosed out a roadside bomb that would have shredded Marc's squad. In Damascus, he'd taken a bullet graze to the flank, lunging at a gunman just as the bastard lined up a kill shot on Marc. 7 years of loyalty, 7 years of trust, etched into the steady rhythm of his paws against the pavement. Marc's hand rested loose on the leash, but it was more habit than necessity. Titan moved like an extension of him, alert but steady, a mirror to the man who trained him. This walk was their ritual, a way to shake off the day's grind. Marc breathed in the damp air, letting it cool the tension that lingered from a 12-hour shift babysitting some corporate suit who thought security was a status symbol. The rain was light, soaking his jacket, but not enough to bother him. Out here, it was just him and Titan. The world pared down to something simple, no orders to follow, no ghost to outrun. For a fleeting moment, he could almost taste peace. Then the headlights cut through the haze. They crept slow and deliberate, slicing the drizzle with a predatory gleam. A black and white cruiser rolling up the street like it owned every inch of it. Marc didn't flinch, but his grip tightened on the leash, a reflex born from too many nights sizing up threats. Titan's ears snapped forward, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. Soft, barely audible, but Marc felt it through the leather like a warning pulse. "Easy, boy," he murmured, voice low and firm, the tone that had steadied men under fire. Titan settled, but his eyes stayed fixed on the car, dark pools of instinct tracking every move. The cruiser eased to a stop beside them, tires crunching wet gravel at the curb. Two figures stepped out, their shapes stark against the glare of the headlights. Vince Decker emerged first, broad and heavy, his uniform stretched tight over a frame built more for bullying than speed, rain streaking his stubbled jaw. Ray Hogan followed, leaner but meaner, his hand resting on his holster, with the casual ease of a man who liked the weight of it too much. They carried the swagger of guys who'd never heard, no, not from the law, not from anyone who mattered. Evening, Decker called, voice sharp and too loud, cutting through the rain's soft drone. Where you headed this late? Mark stopped, turning to face them with a measured calm. Just walking my dog, he said, keeping it short, polite. No sense in giving them a spark they'd light the fire themselves if they wanted one. Hogan tilted his head, rain dripping off his cap as he eyed Titan up and down. That's a big damn dog. Got papers for it? He's trained, Mark replied, voice steady as stone. Doesn't cause trouble. Decker smirked, stepping closer, boots splashing in a shallow puddle. Yeah? Around here, we decide what's trouble. You got ID? Mark's jaw ticked. A faint tightening he buried fast. He'd been here before too many streets, too many towns, always the same dance. The stares that lingered, the questions that weren't questions, the assumption he didn't fit. He reached into his jacket, slow, deliberate, no sudden moves, and pulled out his wallet, handing over his license. Decker snatched it, barely glancing at it before tossing it to Hogan, who squinted at it like he was hunting for a lie. Marcus Reynolds, Hogan drawled, stretching the name out like a taunt. Don't think I've seen you around. I keep to myself, Mark said, locking eyes with him. Live a few blocks up. That's so. Decker edged closer, close enough that Mark caught the stale coffee on his breath. His gaze dropped to Titan, who stood rigid, watching him with a quiet, unblinking focus. Dog like that looks like it could rip someone apart. You sure it's safe? He's trained, Mark repeated, patience thinning but still holding. Only moves if I say or if someone gives him a reason. Hogan chuckled, low and nasty. That a threat? No, Mark said, stare unwavering. Just a fact. Decker's smirk curdled into something harder, darker. He flicked the ID back, letting it fall short, so Mark had to catch it midair. Well, here's a fact, he said, voice dropping to a growl. We don't like strangers strutting around like they belong. Especially not with a mutt like that. Mark caught the ID, tucking it away without breaking eye contact. I live here, he said, each word a measured step. Not a stranger. Yeah? Hogan stepped up now, hand twitching near his holster. Maybe we need to check that out. The air thickened, charged with the promise of something ugly. Titan's ears flattened, his body tensing under the leash, but Mark gave it a subtle tug stand down. He felt it, that old itch before a fight. The one that had kept him alive through ambushes and close calls. These weren't cops doing a job. They were predators sniffing for weakness. And Mark knew deep in his bones they just picked the wrong prey. The rain had thickened, a steady drum beat pounding the pavement as Mark faced Decker and Hogan under the flickering streetlight. The air crackled with tension, a live wire stretched tight between them, ready to snap. Mark's grip on Titan's leash was firm, the damp leather pressing into his palm, but he stood steady, shoulders squared, his breath slow and even. He'd seen this play before, two men itching for a scrap, hands hovering too close to their guns, eyes glinting with the smug certainty of untouchables. Warlords in Fallujah, militia in Mogadishu, they all had that same look, the kind that begged for a reckoning. But this wasn't a battlefield halfway across the world. This was Detroit, his street, and all he'd wanted was a quiet walk with his dog. Decker tilted his head, rain streaking his jaw, his smirk twisting as he sized Mark up. You got a real smart mouth, don't you? He said, stepping closer, boots sloshing through a puddle. Think you're some kind of tough guy, huh? Mark didn't rise to it. I answered you, he said, voice flat, measured. Showed my ID. We're good here. Hogan snorted, shifting his stance, his fingers brushing the grip of his holstered Glock. We're good when we say we're good. He moved fast, snatching at Titan's leash like he meant to rip it from Mark's hand. The dog reacted in an instant. A deep, rolling growl rumbled up from his chest, his body shifting forward, muscles rippling under his wet fur. It wasn't an attack, just a line in the sand, a warning honed by years of training. Titan, sit, Mark barked, the command slicing through the rain like a whip crack. Titan dropped to his haunches, obedient but alert, his dark eyes locked on Hogan, unblinking. Mark's pulse kicked up, not fear, but the cold clarity of a storm rolling in. He'd faced down death too many times to flinch, but he knew the signs of a fight brewing, and these two were damn near begging for it. Has trained, he said, again. Slower. Deliberate. Each word a brick in a wall he'd built to keep this from going sideways. He won't move unless I say or unless you make him. Decker's grin curdled into something meaner. That a threat, boy? He edged closer, chest puffed out, close enough that Marc could smell the whiskey under the coffee on his breath. The word boy landed like a lit fuse, but Marc held it in, burying the heat under years of discipline. His hands stayed loose, but his mind was already running the numbers, Decker's sloppy footing, Hogan's twitchy trigger finger, the 6 feet to the cruiser's door, variables slotting into place like rounds in a clip. No threat, Marc said, meeting Decker's stare head-on. Just how it is. Hogan didn't buy it. He yanked the leash hard, jerking it to throw Titan off balance. The dog's growl sharpened, ears flattening, his body coiling tight. Marc tightened his hold, stepping half in front of Titan to block him. Let go, he said, voice dropping low, a warning wrapped in steel. You're pushing it, pushing it. Hogan barked a laugh, harsh and jagged. He gave the leash another tug, harder this time, and Titan's growl turned into a snarl, teeth bared just enough to show he meant business. Marc's hands shot up, palm out stay but Decker was done talking. His hand dropped to his holster, fingers wrapping around the Glock, eyes wild with something that wasn't quite courage. This mutt's a damn threat, he shouted, voice pitching over the rain. Control it or I will. He's controlled, Marc snapped, volume rising, his calm splintering under the weight of their stupidity. Hez sitting. Hez leashed. He's not doing shit. Lower your damn gun. But Decker wasn't hearing it. His jaw twitched, shoulder squared, fear masquerading as power. I said control it, he roared. And then the gun was up, steady in his grip, barrel aimed straight at Titan's chest. Marc lunged no, the word ripping out of him as he moved to shove Decker's arm aside. But the shot exploded before he could reach him. The crack tore through the night, louder than the rain, reverberating off the houses like a thunderclap. Titan jolted back, a sharp yelp cutting through the air as his legs crumpled beneath him. Blood bloomed across his chest, dark and slick, spilling onto the pavement, swirling with the rainwater in a spreading red stain. Marc hit the ground beside him, knees slamming into the concrete, the jolt shooting up his spine, but he didn't care. Titan, his voice broke, raw and desperate, hands pressing against the wound, blood seeping hot through his fingers. Stay with me, boy, stay with me. Titan's eyes locked onto his, wan and glassy, still carrying that unshakable trust. His chest shuddered once, twice, shallow gasps whistling through his teeth, a faint whimper slipping out as he tried to lift his head toward Marc. Marc cradled him, one hand under his neck, the other slick with blood, whispering, you're good, just hold on. But he wasn't good. The light in those eyes dimmed, flickered, then went out, and Titan's body sagged heavy in Marc's arms, still and silent. Time stopped. The rain pounded down, soaking Marc's jacket, his jeans, mixing with the blood on his hands. But he didn't feel it. His world shrank to the dog in his lap. The dog who'd sniffed out bombs in Kabul, who'd taken a bullet for him in Damascus, who'd been his anchor through every nightmare since. A curtain twitched in a nearby window, a shadow peering out. But no one stepped outside. Fear kept them locked in, like always in this part of town. Marc didn't look up. All he saw was Titan. All he felt was the hole tearing open inside him. And then the rage, cold, sharp, unstoppable, flooding in to fill it. He surged to his feet, Titan's leash slipping from his hand, his voice a guttural roar. You killed him! You fucking killed my dog! He charged Decker, fists swinging hard, slamming into the cop's jaw with a wet crunch that sent him staggering back, blood trickling from his lip. Hogan reacted fast, baton swinging down across Marc's back, a white-hot burst of pain exploding between his shoulders. Marc grunted, dropping to one knee, and Decker piled on fists crashing into his face, splitting his lip, followed by the searing jolt of a taser sinking into his ribs. His body locked up, muscles seizing as the current ripped through him, sending him sprawling onto the wet pavement. Boots pinned his arms, The cold snap of cuffs locking around his wrists, and Mark gasped, blood and rain pooling in his mouth, vision blurring. Through the haze, he saw Titan still there. Just feet away, the rain washing his blood into the gutter like he'd never mattered. Decker crouched beside him, grabbing Mark's jacket and yanking his head up. "Don't make this bigger than it is," he growled, voice thick with triumph. "Nobody gives a shit about you or your mud." He slammed Mark's face back into the concrete, the rough edge scraping his cheek raw. Hogan kicked Mark's ribs, a parting shot that drove the air from his lungs. "Dog's gone, tough guy. Live with it." They hauled him up, dragging him toward the cruiser, his boots scraping the ground, body screaming with every jolt. Mark's head lolled, blood dripping from his chin, but his eyes stayed open, fixed on Titan's body as the distance grew. The cruiser door slammed shut, the engine rumbling as they pulled away. Decker's voice filtered through the partition, smug and lazy. "You're lucky we don't book you for assaulting an officer," Hogan chuckled, glancing back in the mirror. "Yeah, real lucky." Mark didn't respond. He stared out the window, rain streaking the glass, his hands flexing against the cuffs until the metal bit into his skin. They thought this was the end. They thought they'd won. But they didn't know him, not the man who'd survived ambushes, who'd buried enemies under desert sand, who'd learned to turn pain into a weapon. Titan wasn't just a dog, he was family, the last piece of a life Mark had fought to keep whole. And they'd taken him. In the dark of the back seat, with blood still warm on his hands, Mark made a vow not to himself, but to Titan. They'd bleed for this. They'd lose everything. And he'd make damn sure they never saw it coming. The cruiser's engine snarled as it carved through the rain-slicked streets, its red and blue lights slashing across the wet asphalt in jagged pulses. Mark sat cuffed in the back, the metal digging into his wrists, blood trickling from his split lip onto the torn vinyl seat. His ribs throbbed with every shallow breath, a dull ache radiating from where Hogan's boot had landed, and the taser's sting lingered like a nest of hornets under his skin. But the pain was just background noise, a hum he could shove aside. What seared him, what gnawed at his gut, was the image of Titan lying lifeless on the pavement, rain washing his blood into the gutter like he'd been nothing more than roadkill. That wasn't a wound you shrugged off. That was a debt, and it was going to be paid in full. Decker's voice cut through the engine's rumble, smug and lazy, dripping with the confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. "You're lucky we don't pin you for swinging at me, tough guy. Could've been a real bad night." Hogan glanced back in the rearview mirror, his smirk a razor's edge. "Yeah, real bad. Next time, keep that mutt on a tighter leash, or better yet, don't get one at all." Mark didn't bite. He stared out the window, watching the blurred shapes of houses streak by, his reflection a blood-smeared ghost in the glass. His hands flexed against the cuffs, testing the give-a-knot out of panic but calculation. They thought they'd crushed him, thought they'd walked away clean. They didn't know who they just pissed off. 15 years in Delta Force had taught him how to turn rage into a blade, how to take a beating and come back swinging, how to bury an enemy so deep they'd never dig out. Titan wasn't just a dog, he was a soldier, a brother, and these sons of bitches had gunned him down like he didn't matter. They'd regret that. Mark wasn't just coming for them, he was coming for everything they had. The precinct loomed ahead, a low brick slab hunched under the drizzle, its fluorescent lights spilling a sickly glow into the parking lot. Decker and Hogan yanked him out, their grips bruising as they dragged him through the back door, past a bullpen where tired cops hunched over desks, barely glancing up. The air stank of burnt coffee and damp uniforms, a place where justice drowned in bureaucracy and blind eyes. They shoved him into a holding cell, a concrete box with a steel bench bolted to the floor, and slammed the bars shut. Decker leaned in, his bruised jaw twitching, a smirk still clinging to his face. "Sleep it off, hero. We'll deal with you later." Mark eased onto the bench, head tipped back against the cold wall, blood crusting on his knuckles where he'd clocked Decker. 4 hours, he figured, long enough for them to flex, not long enough to need a real charge. His mind ticked like a clock, cold and precise, every second locking another piece into place. Decker's trigger finger, Hogan's twitchy nerves, the way they strutted like they owned the world. They were bullies, Cowards hiding behind badges. And Marc knew how to break men like that. Blood would make them flinch. Brains would bury them. He closed his eyes, not to rest, but to plan. The cell block door banged open at 1:12 a.m., heels clicking sharp against the tile like gunfire. Lena stormed in, rain dripping from her coat, a tablet under her arm and a stack of papers clutched tight. Marc's sister was a hurricane in a suit 5'6", all edges and fire, a defense attorney who'd made her bones shredding corrupt cops and flimsy cases. She shoved the papers at the desk, Sergeant, her voice a blade cutting through the stale air. You've got no rounds to hold him no charges, no warrant, and I've got the neighbor's video queued up for Channel 7. I've also got a civil rights lawyer on speed dial. Release him now or this precinct's on the news by dawn, drowning in lawsuits. The sergeant, a balding, bag-eyed guy who looked like he'd sold his soul for a quiet shift, grumbled under his breath and waved a hand. A uniform shuffled over, keys clanking, and unlocked the cell. Marc stood, slow and stiff, brushing off his jacket as Lena shot him a look half relief, half hellfire. Decker loomed in the doorway, arms crossed, his swollen jaw tightening as Marc stepped out. Keep your head down, he growled, voice low and venomous. Wouldn't want to see you back here. Marc held his gaze, silent, letting the weight of his stare do the talking. Lena grabbed his arm, hauling him toward the exit before he could give Decker the spark he was fishing for. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist, the night air cold against his battered face. Lena rounded on him the second they hit her car, voice dropping to a fierce hiss. What the hell happened, Marc? They shot Titan? He nodded, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Yeah. Right in front of me. Lena's breath caught, her hands balling into fists. She'd known Titan since Marc brought him home, fed him scraps at barbecues, laughed when he'd chased her kids around the yard. Those bastards, she spat, were taking this to court. It'll bury them excessive force. Misconduct. Everything. Marc shook his head, slow and final. Court won't touch them, Lena. You know how it works. They're covered. Then what? She snapped, searching his face. You can't let this go. I'm not, he said, voice quiet but heavy, a promise carved in stone. Lena knew that tone, knew the look in his eyes from the nights he'd come back from deployments, silent and hollowed out. She exhaled hard, rubbing her temples, but didn't push. Just don't do anything stupid, she muttered, unlocking the car. Get in. I'm driving you home. The ride was quiet, the engine's hum swallowing the space where words wouldn't fit. When they pulled up to Marc's house, a weathered one-story with chipped paint and a sagging porch, he stepped out, ribs flaring as he straightened. Lena watched him go, headlights cutting through the dark, but she didn't follow. She knew he needed this alone. Inside, the silence hit like a punch. No click of Titan's nails on the floor, no soft huff as he settled by the door. Marc stood in the living room, rain dripping from his jacket, staring at the empty spot where Titan's bed used to sit. The leash hung on its hook, still wet from the night's chaos. He crossed the room, fingers brushing the leather, and something broke loose inside him. Not tears, not yet, but a fury so cold it burned. He coiled the leash tight in his fist, each loop a vow. They'd pay. He'd make damn sure of it. The next 2 days were a blur of motion. Marc worked like he was prepping a mission, methodical, relentless. He started with Decker, parking a block from O'Malley's in his beat-up Tacoma, watching the cops stumble in at 10 p.m. sharp. He noted the routine. 3 whiskeys, loud laughs, out by 11:15, sloppy and slow, parking his Chevy in the alley out back. Hogan took more work. Marc tailed his cruiser the second day, clocking his solo patrol through the industrial sprawl at dusk, weaving through abandoned warehouses like he was chasing a high. He memorized their patterns, silent and unseen, a predator mapping his kill zone. Back home, he turned the house into a trap. He rigged cameras small, high-def units tucked into the wall clock, the lamp base on the end table wired to a hard drive stashed under the floorboards. He left bait, a shattered beer bottle on the kitchen counter, the side window cracked open just enough to tempt a break-in. They'd come, he knew they would. Men like Decker and Hogan didn't swallow a bruised ego. And when they did, Eddie'd be waiting. Then he called Tyrell. The hacker picked up on the second ring, voice rough with late-night grit. Marc? Shit, man, been a while. What's up? Need a favor, Mark said, cutting straight to it. Two cops, Vince Decker, Ray Hogan, Detroit PD. Dig up everything. Complaints? Payoffs? Dirt. Tyrell whistled low. Stirring the pot again? Thought you were out of the game. They killed Titan, Mark said, words flat but loaded. Silence stretched across the line. Then Tyrell's voice turned hard. Say no more, he'll get it. 48 hours. Mark hung up, leaning back in his chair, the coiled leash beside him like a talisman. Blood and brain shed hit them with both. Decker and Hogan thought they were the hunters. They didn't know they had just become the hunted. The first strike came on the third night. Mark waited in the alley behind O'Malley's, the rain gone, the air sharp with early fall chill. He wore a black hoodie, ski mask pulled tight, blending into the shadows like he'd never left the field. Decker stumbled out at 11:17 p.m., reeking of whiskey, keys jingling as he fumbled toward his car. Mark moved fast, silent, a blur of intent. The first punch was a hook to Decker's jaw, same spot as before, snapping his head aside with a wet crunch. Decker grunted, staggering, but Mark kept going, knee to the gut, doubling him over, then a grab at his collar, slamming him into the brick wall. Decker wheezed, hands clawing at Mark's arms, too drunk to fight back. Mark leaned in, voice a growl through the mask. This is for Titan. He spun Decker around, kicking his knee out with a sharp crack not enough to shatter, just enough to hobble him for weeks. Decker crumpled, gasping, blood spilling from his mouth onto the asphalt. Mark crouched beside him, tilting his head like he was sizing up a carcass. Next time, he whispered, you don't walk away. He straightened, vanishing into the dark as Decker fumbled for his radio, wheezing into it. Hogan, get here now, some bastard got me! Mark watched from a block away, hood up, pulse even. Decker's voice echoed in his head, panicked and broken. Step 1, make them bleed. Step 2, make them scared. The real play was just beginning, and he was already 3 steps ahead. The alley behind O'Malley's had left its mark on Decker 3 nights later. He was still limping, his knee swollen under a brace, his jaw a mottled purple from Mark's fist. Mark had watched him hobble into the precinct that next morning, spitting curses into a bloody rag, while Hogan paced beside him, eyes darting like a cornered deer. They were shaken, their swagger cracked, teetering on the edge Mark had shoved them toward. Had hit them with fear first, let it sink deep, festering like a wound they couldn't stitch. Now it was time to finish the job, break their bodies, then their world. Mark sat in his living room, the faint hum of the lamp casting shadows across the hardwood. The house was a loaded trap, primed and waiting. Cameras blinked silently, hidden in the wall clock, the lamp base capturing every angle, wired to a hard drive stashed under the floorboards. The broken beer bottle gleamed on the kitchen counter, and the side window stayed cracked open, a siren call for trouble. Had spent the last 2 days perfecting it, moving with the precision of a soldier rigging an ambush, every step calculated, every angle covered. Terrell had delivered that afternoon, his voice low and grim over the phone. Got your gold mine, man. 12 excessive force complaints buried by their captain. 3 payoffs from the East Side Kings dates, names, cash amounts. It's tight. Send it, Mark had said, and within an hour, the files hit his laptop, a digital warhead, locked and loaded. But he held off and on the trigger. The evidence was the endgame. He needed them in the kill zone first. Decker and Hogan wouldn't let a beating slide. They'd come for him. Badges be damned. Mark leaned back, Titan's leash coiled on the table, his fingers tracing the leather as he waited. The clock ticked past midnight. Showtime. The knock rattled the door at 12:47 a.m., hard and impatient, shaking the frame. Mark let it hang, counting the seconds, letting them sweat. Another knock, louder, then Hogan's voice sliced through the night. Open the damn door, Reynolds. We know you're in there. Mark rose, slow and deliberate, ribs twinging as he crossed the room. He turned the lock, swung the door wide, and there they were, Decker and Hogan, faces twisted with rage, standing on his porch like they owned it. Decker's limp was worse, his jaw a swollen mess, a dark bruise creeping under his eye. Hogan's hand twitched near his holster, knuckles white with tension. No uniforms, no badges, just 2 men running on fury and whiskey. Something I can help you with? Marc asked, voice cool, leaning against the frame, hands loose at his sides. No spark, not yet. Just bait. Decker shoved past him, shoulders slamming into Marc's chest, forcing him back. Cut the shit, he snarled, voice thick with booze and pain. You think you can jump me and walk away? Think you're hot shit? Hogan kicked the door shut behind him, the click echoing in the stillness. They weren't here as cops. They were here to settle a score, and Marc could feel the cameras rolling. Silent witnesses to their downfall. Marc stumbled from the shove, letting it push him into the side table, the lamp teetering but holding. You got a warrant? He asked, eyebrow raised, playing it calm even as his blood hummed with adrenaline. Every word, every move was fuel for the footage. Hogan barked a laugh, raw and ugly. We don't need a warrant for trash like you. He swung fast, fist cracking across Marc's cheek, snapping his head to the side. Blood welled in Marc's mouth, sharp and metallic, but he didn't swing back. Not yet. He staggered, gripping the table, letting them think he was soft, easy prey. Decker grabbed his collar, yanking him up, and drove a knee into his gut. Marc folded, air rushing out in a harsh grunt, pain flaring hot through his ribs. You're done, Decker spat, breath sour and close. Fucking done. He shoved Marc into the wall, plaster splintering under the force, and Hogan piled on a punch to Marc's side that lit his nerves on fire. Marc groaned, sliding to one knee, blood dripping from his lip to the floor. The cameras saw it, all their fists, their snarls, their threats. You should have stayed down, Hogan growled, towering over him. Now you're not getting up. Marc stayed low, breathing hard, letting them drink it in. Then Decker overplayed his hand. He drew his Glock, the barrel glinting cold in the dim light, aimed at Marc's chest. Say goodnight, asshole. That was the signal. Marc exploded upward, years of training snapping into gear. His left hand shot out, seizing Decker's wrist and twisting hard a sharp crack of bone, breaking split the air as the gun hit the floor. Decker howled, clutching his arm, but Marc was already on Hogan. He drove an elbow into Hogan's throat, a brutal, pinpoint strike that sent him choking and reeling. Marc spun, grabbing Decker's hair and slamming his face into the hardwood once, twice, 3 times, blood spraying in a wet arc, staining the floor red. Decker slumped, moaning, his nose a pulped mess. Hogan rallied, lunging with a wild swing, but Marc ducked, caught his arm, and twisted it behind his back. He swept Hogan's legs, slamming him face first into the ground, then dropped a knee into his spine. Stay down, Marc growled, voice low and lethal. Hogan thrashed, spitting curses, but a sharp stomp to his lower back ended in. They went limp, gasping in the spreading pool of Decker's blood. Marc stood, chest heaving, blood dripping from his knuckles and his own busted lip. The room was chaos, furniture toppled, crimson streaks on the floor, 2 broken men whimpering at his feet. He stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans, and glanced at the clock. The camera's red light blinked, steady and sure. Step 1, draw them in. Step 2, break them. Step 3 was the knockout. He hauled Decker and Hogan out by their collars, dumping them on the wet grass like garbage. Tell your captain I said hi, he muttered, then locked the door behind him. The footage uploaded to a secure server as he grabbed his keys, pinging Tyrell with a single word. Now. 40 minutes later, Marc sat at Motor City Casino 20 miles away, a whiskey in hand and chips stacked on the blackjack table. Tyrell had texted earlier. Cam footage looped, phone pinged to Motor City Tower takes 20 minutes. You're clean. Marc nodded to the bartender, making sure his face stuck, tipping big, chatting about the Tiger's latest choke. By 2 a.m., he had an alibi, ironclad receipts, witnesses, timestamps. The video dropped at 3:17 a.m. Uploaded anonymously as Detroit Cops, Blood and Corruption. It spread like wildfire, grainy shots of Decker and Hogan bursting in, beating Marc, pulling a gun, then getting crushed. Tyrell layered it with the dirt. 12 buried complaints, 3 payoffs from the East Side Kings, dates and names in stark relief. By dawn, #Justice for Titan was trending, 1 million views and climbing. Protesters swarmed the precinct, signs waving, voices roaring. Marc watched from a diner across town, coffee cold in his mug, as the TV blared. Lena called at 6 a.m., voice tight. What the hell did you do? This is everywhere. He told her to set up a press conference. No details, just do it. She cursed but agreed. At noon, he stood on the precinct steps, Lena beside him, cameras flashing like a storm. The crowd roared as he took the mic, bruises stark on his face, eyes burning cold. My name's Marcus Reynolds, Delta Force, 15 years. 3 nights ago, officers Vince Decker and Ray Hogan shot my dog, Titan, for nothing. Titan wasn't just a dog. He pulled me out of hell more times than I can count. They beat me in the street, broke into my home, tried to finish me. This, he gestured to the swelling crowd, is what they've done to dozens before me. I used my fist to make them kneel, the truth to make sure they never stand again. They took him, and I took everything from them. The crowd erupted, cheers drowning the reporters. Marc stepped back, letting Lena take over. Inside the precinct, Decker and Hogan watched on a flickering screen, battered and pale. Decker slammed his splinted wrist on the table, yelling, "Check the damn camera, she set us up." Hogan paced, muttering, "No way he was at Motor City, no way." But the captain just stared, silent and stone-faced. The alibi held traffic cams, casino footage, witnesses. No one bought their story. The world didn't care. Marc had played them clean off the board. They'd bleed in court next. But for now, he'd watch them sink in the chaos he'd unleashed. Titan's justice was rolling, and it wasn't stopping. The precinct steps still thrummed with noise as Marc walked away, the crowd's cheers fading into a distant roar. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted over each other, but he kept his eyes forward, shoulders squared under his battered jacket. Lena stayed behind, her voice cutting through the chaos as she faced the press, laying out the legal, hammer-shed, drop lawsuits, depositions, a reckoning for the whole damn department. The video had blown the lid off, and Tyrell's files had lit the match. By noon, every screen in Detroit was screaming the story. CNN, Fox, local news, justice for Titan, trending like wildfire, a war cry for a city fed up with eating its own wounds. Protesters choked the streets outside the precinct, signs slashing the air. No more badges, just blood, justice for Titan, break the blue wall. Marc had kicked the hornet's nest, and the swarm wasn't stopping. Inside, Decker and Hogan were sinking fast. The footage beating Marc, pulling a gun looped endlessly, a noose tightening with every replay. Their rants about Marc jumping Decker in the alley fell apart against his alibi. Casino receipts, traffic cam stills, a bartender swearing he'd been at Motor City tossing back whiskey while they bled on his floor. The department couldn't sweep it under this time. By 3 p.m., internal affairs stormed in, badges ripped away, suspensions without pay slapped down. But that was just the warm-up. Tyrell's Dirt 12 buried complaints. 3 payoffs from the East Side Kings landed on the DA's desk like a live grenade. Conspiracy, misconduct, assault, illegal entry. The charges stacked high, each one a brick in their tomb. The trial hit 6 weeks later, a media storm that turned Detroit into ground zero. The courtroom was a pressure cooker. Reporters jammed the gallery, activists lined the halls, the air buzzing with static and the faint hum of phones capturing it all. Decker sat at the defense table, wrists splinted, face a patchwork of fading bruises. Hogan slumped beside him, eyes sunken, twitching like a rat in a trap. Their lawyers flailed self-defense, a misunderstanding, but the video shredded every lie. Marc took the stand, voice steady as granite, recounting Titan's death, the break-in, the fists and the gun. They thought they owned us, he said, staring down the jury. They don't own shit anymore. The gallery held its breath as he stepped down, a flicker of something relief, maybe easing the knot in his chest. Not joy, not yet, but a weight shifting. The verdict landed heavy. Guilty, all counts. The judge, a grizzled black man with a voice like cracked pavement, didn't blink as he read it out. Vince Decker and Ray Hogan, you abused your power, betrayed this city, and showed no remorse. For excessive force, aggravated assault, and conspiracy, I sentence you to 30 years in federal prison. No parole. The room exploded, cheers, gasps, a few choked sobs. Decker's head dropped into his hands. Hogan's jaw went slack, but the bailiffs didn't wait, cuffs snapped on, and they were hauled out, 30 years crashing down like a cell door. No deals, no mercy. Done. Marc watched from the front row, hands loose in his lap, face unreadable, but his chest lighter than it had been in weeks. The gavel banged, the crowd thinned, but the fallout kept rolling. The captain who'd covered their tracks quit the next day, his career ash in the wind. 3 old cases, beatings buried deep, cracked open. 4 more cops dragged in for questioning. The system didn't topple, but it shook. And Marc's fists and Tyrell's files were the fault line. Not just for Titan, but for every name on those hidden reports, every life the precinct had crushed. That evening, Marc drove to a quiet cemetery on the city's edge, the sky bruising purple with dusk. The air carried the bite of wet grass and pine as he walked the gravel path, boots crunching, soft. Titan's headstone sat under an oak, simple and gray. Loyal to the end. Marc crouched, ribs a faint ache now, and traced the words with his fingers. The leash was in his hand, coiled tight, beside a dented bulletin he'd carried through Syria. A night Titan had saved him from a sniper's scope. "Hey, boy," he said, voice low, rough at the edges. He exhaled, a tremor in his breath, the first crack in the armor he'd worn since that rain-soaked night. "I got him. Used my hands to make him bleed, my head to lock him away. 30 years they're gone, and they're not coming back." His jaw tightened, eyes glinting hard in the fading light. "Not just for you, for everyone they broke before you. They're done." He set the leash and bullet against the stone, a quiet offering, and stood, rolling his shoulders. "Justice doesn't come knocking," he said, voice steady now. "You fight for it with fists when they swing, brains when they hide. That's how we win. Titan for you, for us." The words settled, solid and true, a vow kept. Had fought for Titan the way Titan had fought for him, unyielding, relentless, until it was over. His phone buzzed as he turned to leave. Tyrell's text lit the screen. 4 more names on the list, same precinct. "You in?" Marc stared at it, thumb hovering, then typed back, "Yeah." A cold smile tugged his lips as he pocketed the phone and walked to his truck, dusk swallowing him whole. Decker and Hogan were just the opening shot. More badges hid dirt, more lives waited for justice. Marc wasn't done, not by a long shot. The engine growled awake, headlights piercing the dark as he pulled onto the road. Titan was gone, but the war wasn't. Not yet. The story of Marc Reynolds isn't just a tale of revenge. It's a raw, unfiltered lesson about power, justice, and what it takes to stand up when the world tries to keep you down. Marc didn't start this fight. He was just a man walking his dog, trying to live quiet. But when Decker and Hogan took Titan, his brother in arms, his lifeline, they didn't just kill a dog. They woke a force they couldn't handle. And through Marc's journey, we learned some hard truths that hit close to home. First, justice doesn't come knocking on your door with a polite smile. It's something you have to fight for, tooth and nail. Marc showed us that when the system fails, when those in power think they're untouchable, you don't just sit back and take it. He used his fists to make them bleed and his brains to make them fall, because sometimes that's what it takes. The courts, the rules, the proper channels, they're only as good as the people enforcing them. And when those people are rotten, you've got to carve your own path. Marc didn't wait for someone else to fix it. He took it into his own hands. And that's a lesson for anyone who's ever been wronged and told to stay quiet. Second, strength isn't just muscle, it's strategy. It's grit. It's knowing when to hit and when to hold back. Marc could have gone in guns blazing, taken Decker and Hogan out in that alley and called it a day. But he played it smarter. He set traps, gathered evidence, built an alibi so tight they couldn't touch him. He turned their own arrogance against them, let them walk right into the noose he'd tied. That's real power, not just breaking bones, but breaking their whole damn world. It's a reminder that fighting smart can cut deeper than fighting hard. And Marc did both like a pro. Finally, this story teaches us about loyalty, not the kind you talk about, but the kind you live. Titan wasn't just a pet. He was Marc's rock, a soldier who'd saved his life more times than he could count. When they took Titan, they took a piece of Marc's soul, and he honored that bond by going all in. He didn't just get even, he made sure Titan's death meant something, that it cracked open a system that hurt so many others. Loyalty like that, the kind that it drives you to fight when everything's stacked against you, is rare. It's worth holding on to, worth defending, no matter the bargain. So what's the takeaway? When the world kicks you down, whether it's a badge, a boss, or a bully, you don't have to stay down. You fight back with everything you've got, blood, brains, whatever it takes. Justice isn't handed out, it's claimed. Marc proved that, and it's a lesson we can all carry. The system might bend, it might break, but it won't fix itself. That's on us. Hey, if this story hit you as hard as it hit me, if Marc's fight for Titan got your blood pumping, or made you think, drop a like down below. It lets me know you're feeling it, and it keeps this channel rolling. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. We've got more stories like this, coming tales of grit, guts, and justice that don't pull punches. Stick around because we're just getting started.